Caglionone is one of the top prospects heading into the 2024 draft and has drawn comparisons to Shohei Ohtani. While that pressure is a bit unfair, it speaks to the level of potential and the high level of skill he's shown to this point in his college career. Coming out of high school, he was a top 40 prospect nationally, and last year he was a finalist for the Golden Spikes Award and unanimous first team All American. While he's an impressive position player and hitter, we're going to focus on his path forward as a pitcher. He's been up to 99 miles per hour in games and was reportedly up to 101 in bullpens last year. So, what lets him reach these elite velocities? Let's talk through his mechanical analysis. Okay, so kind of the first thing you're going to see here is as we get to that peak leg lift, that center of mass shift is pretty solid. Not like the best, not like Lincecum level necessarily, but pretty solid. And so, what that center of mass shift allows him to do is we shift that kind of the primary force vector to be more towards home plate, right? And kind of what you're seeing is he keeps this pelvis kind of relatively neutral as he works down the mound, right? Pretty level there as we go. He's holding this tension in the back leg and back hip there as we go. And what's going to happen is as we kind of get further and further down the mound, he holds that for a very long time. And so we're getting a very good pre-stretch as we go. And this kind of leads into the next point, right? He winds that tension in that back hip really well. And so you're going to see this a little bit better over here on this side from the rear view. But you can see that hip kind of coiling as we go into that. And so what that's going to do is allow him to kind of put a pre-stretch on those rotators of the hip. And what you're going to see is as he goes into foot strike, he's going to let all that tension go. It's going to unwind into foot strike really powerfully. And we're going to kind of make the most of that kind of center of mass shift plus the winding of the back hip, right? So the center of mass shift does a few things. Not only do we shift that primary force vector, right, but we also kind of take advantage of that kinetic energy. So we think about, kind of falling for a depth jump, how we get that free kinetic energy. And if we can sync it up with that muscular action, we get higher levels of output than we would with that kind of muscular action alone and no kinetic energy. And so that's the center of mass shift kind of provides the same principle. Basically, you're allowing kind of your body to fall down the mound with the help of gravity, and then we're going to sync up that kind of pulse of the lower body with that kind of push and rotation as we go into foot strike. And so that kind of leads us to the next point. So what does his lead leg block look like? So you can kind of see if we call this foot strike, he's in a pretty good position, right? One of the benchmarks that we're looking for is where's that knee kind of relative to the ankle. And in this case, we're behind that ankle. So pretty solid. And then we're going to look to see, does that knee go forward at all? All right. And it does not. It reverses direction really well. And so knee extension is just kind of one part of the game, right? We've talked about this in the past, but not everyone's going to look like Justin Verlander. We don't need that C kind of going on there. It's going to be a matter of what does it take to take all of the slack out of the system, so we have kind of this stable base to rotate around. And so we're looking for kind of a co-contraction at the ankle, the knee, and the hip, and he does a really good job of that. And so we're also looking to kind of reverse against the direction of the throw, right? So we know from research that the most important direction of force application from that lead leg is anterior to posterior. So basically front to back against the direction of the throw. So we have kind of this stable base to rotate around. We're getting all that linear energy transferred into the torso, which will then be transferred into kind of the arm and the hand and then into the ball. And so he does a really good job of that. So kind of the next piece here, what does his spine look like? So one of the principles that Paul Nyman has talked about is that bow flex bow. So going from a position of relative flexion like he is here, and then at foot strike extension, and then through ball release, global flexion again. And so basically using his spine like a whip. And so there's kind of levels to this, right? He doesn't do it quite as well as like Chase Burns does, for example. He's got that kind of elite spine whip. But obviously he's a bigger, stronger guy and a different type of athlete. So that does not necessarily fit his mechanical model as well as it does a more elastic guy like Chase Burns. He's definitely a more muscularly driven guy. Again, there's levels to this. So he's not fully muscularly driven. He certainly has his elastic strengths as well, but just different types of athletes. So kind of the next piece here is that arm swing. What does that arm swing look like, right, as we go through this? And so we could see it's reasonably rhythmic. If we watch it at full speed, that can sometimes be helpful, all right? So we'll look at this, and he does kind of take that downswing up through acceleration and into ball release. Is it the smoothest and most rhythmic I've ever seen in my entire life? No. But all of his lower body stuff is pretty elite. And he's obviously a really big, strong guy, so that's helpful as well. And so we can see the arm swing's pretty solid. Does he find the deepest positions in the world, right? So at flip up, where is his arm, right? So we're here. So we're getting some pec stretch, but nothing crazy. It's not the deepest position in the world. It's not, again, not Tim Lincecum. Would this arm action necessarily work for a 5'9" guy? Maybe not, but he's 6'5", 250 plus. So it doesn't have to work for a 5'9" guy, right? These mechanical models differ to some degree based on, what are the strengths and weaknesses of an athlete, and all of these other kind of attributes. And there's bandwidths to this, right? So he falls into a certain kind of bandwidth that may not work for other guys, and that's totally fine. But with his elite lever length, right, like we saw with Noah Syndergaard at his peak, he doesn't have to find the craziest, deepest positions in the world to still throw really, really hard. All right. What are we seeing kind of going into ball release? Does his arm get into the plane of shoulder rotation? Yep, he does that. So we're sinking that into that. And then what that means is we're going to be able to capture all of that rotational energy from the torso kind of into the arm. If we get way out of plane up here, we're not going to sink that rotational energy into the arm and then hand and then ball. But where he is, he's doing a really good job of that. So that's extremely helpful to kind of maximize that energy transfer as we go through. And so, what kind of physical qualities does he have that kind of help make him so special? We kind of talked about that elite lever length. That's a big one. Having long arms like that and then being big and strong, 6'5", 250, and then kind of elite weight room numbers, as some of the strength coaches at University of Florida have kind of mentioned. And then obviously is a great athlete all around because of what he can do on the other side of the ball as well. So these are all like extremely helpful for him and makes his mechanical model a little bit different than maybe it would for a different type of athlete, which is totally fine. You have to understand that there are bandwidths to this. So in terms of, improvements, what would make him better, even though he's already elite? Well, I think one thing is we can see his torso goes a little bit early. So if we call that kind of weight bearing, his torso's a smidge open, right? Nothing crazy, but a little bit early. We're again kind of nitpicking here, but we could get maybe a little bit greater stretch across that fascial sling there if he was a little bit later with that. But nothing, kind of terrible there. And certainly he makes up for it in other ways, as we kind of already discussed. In terms of that arm action, right? His elbow's a little bit low at foot strike. And so what that can lead to is kind of some pushing, and not as kind of like relaxed, smooth pulling arm action as we might see from some of the elite arm action guys, a la Jordano Ventura and guys like that. The pec's line of pull is at 90 degrees. So I want that elbow a smidge higher than we're kind of seeing from him here. But overall, kind of not a huge deal. But if we got that up a little bit, that would be probably a little bit better and lead to maybe even kind of better output again. He's already elite. I'm sure he's already kind of working on these things. But if I had to nitpick, those are kind of where I would kind of work on improving those things. So overall, Jac Caglionone, elite prospect. It's fun to kind of take a look at these things today. Again, understand there's bandwidths between different types of athletes, but there are principles that we need to understand in order to kind of build out our mechanical models for different guys and kind of let them kind of develop towards their strengths. If you got questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. Thanks for watching and listening today, and feel free to check out our website if you want any of our other long-form content. Thanks. Bye.